Welcome to the Bucky Call for this weekend, June 22nd, 23rd, depending on which continent you're on. And we're continuing our study of Critical Path, and we're at the end of the book in one of the appendices, and we're doing the chronology of scientific discoveries, and we're all the way up to almost modern time. We're into the 1900s. And so we're going to continue that today. And our objectives are to use, Richard sent us a chronophile because his group looked at this and they developed a kind of a chronophile inserting their own events. And I've sent that file out to everybody along with the PDF of the book. And so we're just talking, we're going down through noticing the inventions and the events that occurred and inserting our own family situations and awarenesses that come to us during the time. So if something happened, you're invited to just say, oh, on that date, this happened. Like I mentioned, my grandmother came across the year of the Titanic. My grandmother's family came from England to America, the year of the Titanic. And although you guys have heard this several times, my great grandfather was too cheap to buy a ticket on the Titanic, so he took the next boat. And of course, that's made my life a little bit easier. It made my genetic stream a little bit more prevalent. So anyway, so we're doing such fun things as that, and we're happy to have you back, John. How are you feeling, and what do you expect to get out of today?
Look, I'm just glad to be back. It's been a long gap. And I'm just happy to learn anything new or to have some old memories refreshed, remind a little bit more about Bucky. We used to have, in moving office, I had a couple of interview rooms set up with Bucky photos and quotes and caricatures. And now I've got those, and I'm just setting up the study at home at the moment, and I'm going to get those hung, a number of Bucky caricatures and quotes, and so my study will become the new Bucky room.
Cool.
So anything I learn out of today will be worthwhile. Anne, how do you feel? What do you hope to take out of today?
Yes, it's good to have you back here, John. And actually, I just got back from the airport, dropping off our visitor from the US. She's from LA. The president of Women of Global Change was here, and that's why I had to miss the meeting on Wednesday. So anyway, she's very excited about what's going on here, and so going back to the States, she's gonna call me and see how else to connect. Yeah. So today, I'm very happy to I'm looking forward to actually moving forward with this chronophile. Normally, we just ignore all the appendices and all the at the end, right? But this is really, really powerful as we were going through the discussions. I think we've been doing it for about a month now, yeah? Going through the chronophile. Yeah, it's been very powerful. And hi, Joe. Good to see you.
Hi, and how are you?
Good, good. Thank you. And yeah, Joe, how do you feel and what do you expect to take away today?
I don't feel all that great this evening, I gotta tell you. So, just battling a little bit of cold. But other than that, there's been a lot of good things that have been going on in my life. So probably since I've last seen everybody, recently on a Stoic retreat. That was a lot of fun, and learned a lot there. Really got a lot out of it, and so that was a special time. And I have somebody else that's helping out around here. It's really kind of built a really good relationship with my mother, and the important thing is that she's actually demonstrated to me that I need to be a little bit more patient. It's interesting to have another, to have someone else's perspective on things. So I'm doing well overall. Just this a little bit of this cold is kind of weighing on me a little bit. But I'm happy to see everybody here this evening, and my expectation to get out of today is just to continue to work through the chronofile. Actually, was going through some of CJ's stuff on the chronofile that I found that I had recently, and we had a discussion about a week ago, about the chronofile. And one of the things that I found to be so interesting was this idea about specifically one of CJ's essays. And what we discussed was how there are these Design Your Life courses at Stanford now. And it's the most popular course there at Harvard and Stanford. And it's very well known, very well known book. It's they have a number of videos actually online. And truthfully, if they had been keeping a chronofile like Bucky, for that same amount of time, I think a lot of the individuals that are in universities and would have a much deeper grasp, even though maybe Bucky came into his own on his own, at his own time, but to be able to have that insight about yourself, it's invaluable. And I really think that that's where the chronofile really does pay a lot of pay off, so to speak, in that it gives you some insights into yourself and allows you to design your life according to who you are and what you want to be.
Cool.
And who hasn't gone? Steve?
Yeah, Richard.
Richard, how are you feeling? What are you looking to take away from today?
Well, it's pretty good overall. Today has been one of the nicer spring summer days we've had here in Calgary. But a number of things crossed my mind just as we were talking. With the Trim Tab group that I'm on, and we meet every other Saturday, and so we met this morning. And what we've been going through is Fuller's operating manual for Spaceship Earth. And what's been interesting is looking at what he was sort of predicting, if you want, in the 60s, and at least that's when some of this book was written. And so what it did for me was it triggered something in a conversation I had with the leader of our Canadian Association of Social Workers, and they're going to be celebrating their 100th anniversary in 2026. And in 1987, 88, I worked with a cohort of students, and we tried to put down in writing everything we know about social work, sort of along the line of Bucky talking about everything he knows. Wasn't quite as long as his, but and it was designed as a futurist presentation that was going to be delivered at the 100th anniversary of the association in 2026. I never dreamed that I would ever be anywhere near close to actually being around when that happened or was to happen. But it's amazing. We made some predictions on the basis that our discipline would become grounded to Fuller's thinking and work. And what would the discipline look like, and what would the world look like if more of us were kind of grounded to his work? When I read that paper today, as if it was being delivered in 2026, we're in for a really big shock when comes to realizing that what we had predicted has not come into being. We never did adopt the model, which connects again to what Anne is doing with her educational system to try and get some of these thinkings into young people's minds. And so in the last week or so, I've also been in my matchmaking mood, matching Anne with one of our World Weaver groups, who's now involved with Buckminster Fuller Institute and design work, and working on a way in which to help children learn about his work. And so I thought, wow, there should be a connection between him and Anne. And the other is that some of the people from the TrimTab group are heading off to Stanford this coming week on Thursday, and they have access to something like 10 boxes of the, if you want, chronophile information that's there. So it's going to be exciting to see what they actually get a chance to look at and read. And the other, I found something today that talks about Fuller in quite an elaborate way, and his connection to synergetics and that sort of thing. So I posted it on our LivingWorks website to show people that I have been connecting some of the models that we've been using to Buckminster Fuller's works, but most people don't know about that in detail. And I connected the fact that he had a suicide experience in 1927, which was his turning point, it seems. And the fact that he died in 1983, exactly the same year that our organization was being put forward to do what I now think we were trying to do, and that is to make the world work for 100% of those who at some point in their life experience something along the line of suicide, either in their own attempt, in the family members, and that sort of thing. So I had never realized that Bucky's death in '83 and the startup of our company was in the same year, which maybe speaks to regeneration of his ideas. So I'm looking forward to more of this chronophile discussion, because it seems to be unearthing and peeling back certain experiences and memories that you forget about. And just thinking of what Joe has been talking about with his mother and whatnot, I always still remember how often we sort of say, you know, I never did ask my mother, my father, my grandfather to tell me something about, you know, their life and circumstances, and now they're gone, and I wish to hell I'd done it because now I don't know. And so I think it's so important to be able to chronophile some things and make them available in an autobiographical sort of way. So that's a long-winded sort of how I'm feeling and what I want to get out of this evening. And back to you, Steve.
Well, thank you. It's just really exciting to have you all here, and I've been listening to your comments about what's going on here. You know, I agree with you that having a chronophile and just being aware of the fact that a chronophile can make a difference has been really powerful for me. I almost am embarrassed to say I'm writing a book, because I'm writing a book. And I've thought about putting my resume in there, and thought not, because it seems to be just more or less egotistical. But if I approach the resume from a chronophile point of view, you know, here are the experiences that I had. And I think, well, these are chronology of the experiences. However, if I would have just named my experiences, I would have hopscotched around a little bit and picked these as major, you know, the top three. The problem is, the reason why that one is top one is because of all the time I wasted with the others. If you get what I'm saying. In other words, the chronology of the learning affects the impact of the learning, which is kind of interesting. So I'm dealing with that. Furthermore, I'm just more than convinced. I mean, I was with my daughter today from New York. She took pictures of green Jell-O from the Mormon Chuckarama bar to send back to her people in New York, because her people in New York would not believe that we ate green Jello at a Chuckarama. So here she is documenting her life, right? And it seems to me that out of all the bad things coming out of social media, our society is creating a chronophile. My kids, my grandkids, their life is chronophiled. And they can go back and see videos of themselves as little kids. I wish I could see a video of myself as a little kid. My mother told me I was cute, but I have no way to prove it.
I believe her, Steve.
You do believe her. Thank you very much. But you know, the chronophile, I think it's happening. And it took how many thousand years of human existence, and then how many 100 years of technology, and now all of a sudden we're on this new era. And then I'm pondering what you said, Richard, about and how disappointed I am that psychology has not accepted a Bucky model of psychology. But you know, as I pondered your words, Bucky's model is 4-dimensional, and what I see in society today is everything's one-dimensional. It's this is how I feel, lump it. I mean, it isn't a 4-dimensional reality. It's a 1-dimension. Most people try to push that 1 dimension. Drives me crazy. Anyway, I'm looking forward. Maybe there's some new. I was listening to an interview with Lex Friedman and a guy whose name I can't pronounce, but he's working on an AI program. They're calling it, I think it's called Perplexity or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's out to promote human knowledge and to promote human curiosity. So maybe with all this stuff, there's real hope. So I'm looking forward to, what's that, Jim?
That's interesting. No, I use Perplexity.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation and getting ready here. I'm kind of embarrassed. I should have said this at the opening call. We have not had a call since 6/1. John, however busy you were moving, we found our own excuses not to. This is our first meeting since weekend of June 1, June 2. So you took a perfect time to take a hiatus. You know, if you'd been available, we would have been going on. So we're about ready to begin. I think we're ready. Is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up before we get started? Okay, I'm going to share screen. We're starting at the bottom of page 370 in the Critical Path book. And let's see here. Part of me wants to share my screen, but I've kind of learned to not share the screen. I've learned to share just the document we're using so that I have access to my screen and can do other things as necessary to run the meeting without interrupting the video and stuff like that. So here we are. We're at 1928. And this is the first 2 items. Then we're going to switch to the next page to go to the next part. We also have ready to go Richard's chronophile, which his last entry is 1927. Is 1931, it looks like to me. So we'll bring those things up as we go. So what we've been doing is just kind of going through and reading these and then pausing whenever we want and interrupting whenever we want to notice what can we bring to this chronophile, our awareness of Bucky, of his systems, our own personal lives. What can we bring to the call? So who wants to begin reading tonight? John, you've been on vacation for a while.
I know, yes, I can read, yes.
All right, good.
So your last item was teletype, or is it the
Yeah,
first
that's
item?
the first item for today.
Okay, teletype in 1928.
Yeah. Other items in 1928 are if you can say that word in Australian, I'd sure appreciate it.
The dirigible, the Graf Zeppelin.
Yeah. Flown across the Atlantic by Dr. Eckner. Okay, other events of 1928. Here we go. Continue.
Sir Charles Kingsford Smith, an Australian, flies Pacific, California to Australia.
He was an Australian, John?
Australian Kingsford Smith.
How appropriate for you to be continuing to read.
Yep. The Ford Model A huge part in the future of automobiles. the
Yeah.
mass-produced car for the people.
Yeah.
Let me just
And
speak to
Flynn
that
was-
one for a sec. That 1928 Model A Ford, my wife's grandparent, father, gave a Model A Ford 1928 to all 4 of his kids.
Wow.
Wow.
He was a rancher here in Calgary or in this area. And my wife's mother was a young woman at that time, and she was a school teacher. She took every summer off for about 6 or 7 years, and she and another close friend or cousin, they traveled from Alberta, Calgary to LA, to Yellowstone, to British Columbia, to Ontario. And it boggles my mind to think of what kind of driving conditions they were in. And these young women were out seeing the world. They probably had saw more things than if you joined the Navy.
Mm.
But did they have a male escort?
No, the most time it was just 2, and they were 19, 20, 21, 22 maybe, and they
Yeah.
did it in 1929, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34.
Wow.
Wow.
They were
Anyway,
probably packing a pistol.
Were they packing a pistol, Richard? I don't think Canadians are mean enough to pack a pistol.
no, and then the other thing that happened is that my father, who grew up in Ontario, he took a short course in herd improvement when he was about 19 years old, 20 years old, and he got hired by Purdue University in Indiana to be a research assistant, probably. And anyway, he ended up there illegally, and he kept telling his professor about being told that he wasn't allowed in the United States, and the professor kept saying things like, well, write a letter back to DC saying thank you for letting me know, put it in another envelope, send it home to Toronto, give it to your mother and have her send it from Canada to DC. And so he stayed in Indiana for 5 years, or 4 years, I guess, and he returned to Ontario in 1928 and then came out west. And eventually he met his wife, who was born and raised in Iowa, or born in Iowa, and then they moved to Canada. So it's like you, Steve, that the probabilities had these people not done some of the things they did when they did them, chances are you and I talking tonight would have been impossible.
Mm.
And so you have illegal immigrants in your bloodline then.
Yeah.
And we could talk about Ford Model A. I mean, Henry Ford, what kind of a person he was is another conversation, but his concept of industrialized production and his concept of paying his employees was really a landmark.
You know, I'm sorry. Ooh,
Go ahead.
I really
I'm
walked in.
complete. Go ahead, Joe.
No, you know, it is a mixed story, even on the professional end. Meaning, and Richard was mentioning operating manual for spaceship Earth. This element of specialization in the assembly line, and that's something where there were a lot of management specialists and consultants that always thought the assembly line is one of the worst things that's happened to the American worker. Not that it wasn't efficient, but it most certainly limited the perspective of the worker and was more about the product,
Yeah.
and less about the craftsmanship, I'll just say.
Yeah.
And so and just as a side note, I don't want to go too far on this, but in one of my conversations with a physician, when I was kind of trying to figure out, what's going on in the United States with its medical system. And one of the doctors I spoke to, who was on my Stoke seminar, he said that one of the issues is too many tests, but the other is too many specialists.
Yeah.
And so this over specialization, that exists within the United States, it's problematic on a number of levels, not just the level of, you have somebody that's more of would be considered a professional. And then you have the individuals that are blue collar, but they're still pigeonholed. And that's highly problematic. But anyway, I think that's important to at least note.
Cool. I think, are we ready to continue?
Yes. Penicillin discovered, Fleming.
By mistake. Wish I made a mistake like that. I've got plenty of mistakes, but nothing like that.
Well, as Bucky said, I've made more mistakes than anybody else I know, and that's why I know more than anybody else I know.
Absolutely. Mistake.
That's a
You
good
don't
one.
make mistakes, you don't learn anything.
Cool.
Absolutely. No, I think that's the fact that we punish people for making mistakes is one of the biggest problems.
Well, for years, education was based on the perfection model. You needed to get 100 out of 100.
Yeah,
that's right.
The discovery model, where you make mistakes and learn.
I'll add something to that one. One of the things that, this is an accidental thing, and it became something we didn't realize how much of an impact it was going to make to the students. I knew that in the schools in Malaysia, doing corrections is a waste of time. How if you get you make a mistake with your work, then you have to do corrections. So what happens with corrections is the teachers who go through the answers, and then it's on the board and you just copy. Or you do corrections on your own and you copy from your friend. So it was really a waste of time because it doesn't get anybody better at it. So because I knew I didn't get better at it because I still didn't know how to do the work, right? So when I started doing my classes, I said, okay, we're not going to do corrections, but you're going to do upgrading just by the change of the term and how we were practicing it. So instead of getting the kids to check with friends for answers or we give the answers, they had to sit down and figure it out a second time. If it's like math and those kind of answers, they have to figure it out again. And usually second time they get it right. And sometimes second time they still don't get it right. We go a third time, just put some thought into it. And sooner or later, the kids started to realize that they could attempt the questions on their own. Now, on English side, when we teach them skills, and then like say how to add descriptives inside, descriptors and all that. So and then you look at their work and you look at it. Okay, this paragraph here, a couple of sentences here. Why don't you attempt to put in some additional details, right? And then they sit down and they put it in. And then all we did was ask them, which one sounds better? Okay. And they always tell you the second attempt always looks better. And the thing that they have to learn and understand is that who came up with it, the ideas and the details. And the children always say, yes, they did it themselves. I say, perfect. So what is the teacher's job, right? All we did was to give you another chance. Not give another chance, is give you the time and to push you to just think harder. Okay. And they create brilliant work. And the kids, so the students that go through our, the task that we give them like this, some of them have written things and they've taken 5 tries to get it, And we realized that they were leveling up from doing that. They were leveling up their work, their ability. For where math and sciences were concerned, some of them, their test results were always around 50 something. And you know why? What I realized was over the years, the reason why they do all their work, okay? But it depends on how much of the work that's given to them, homework or even classwork, that they're willing to do on their own. Many of them, they'll attempt all the ones that they can. The ones they cannot, straight away they'll look for help from friends or relatives or tuition teachers or parents. Yeah. And the results also show up that they only know about 50% of to be able to do it on their own. So until when we started getting them to upgrade, then they're actually attempting the questions they're not very good at. And so slowly their marks started to climb to 60%, 70%. We didn't realize this until many years down the road, that was making the difference. Okay, just by doing upgrading. And so you're absolutely right. In the mistakes are punished. So for a while as well, even when the students are doing practices in class and all that with past year exam papers, we didn't go down the route of deducting marks. So if they follow the processes, the thinking process we put them through, they score bonus points. Out of 5, maybe they get 3. And then if they submit that question on time, they get bonus marks. And we just add up, and we didn't care if the total marks were higher than the full marks. Because what we did was we were employing computer games. You know how they reward you for everything? And they keep telling you perfect or well done or impressive. And so the students were just accumulating points. And this was something I learned when we created the first chemistry role-playing game, which we launched in actually GDC in San Francisco. So I learned that the reason why games are just so encouraging for young people is that you keep adding points for everything you do. And whereas exams and schoolwork has got a full mark, if it's 100, there's only one way it goes, down. It never ever goes up. And that in itself is so damaging and demoralizing for kids. And that's where that fear of making mistakes becomes very prevalent. Okay, so I just thought I'd just share what we accidentally discovered as to what really works for children. And for us, our kids will level up. They'll level up to an A for you. And on their own, when they go out to work, even when they go to college, they know what an A looks like. They know what a B looks like. They know if their work is a B and what it takes to get to an A if they want it. Okay, all because we took them through the process rather than, okay, you know what, do corrections. And corrections, my God, has never worked in Asia. Okay, so what they do is they memorize.
I don't think it works anywhere.
Let me give you the punishment side of that kind of story. I was teaching a mother with 2 kids. One was, I think, grade 2, maybe. One might have been grade 3 or 4. And so I was in my teaching. I was teaching them about Buc-ee's up and or in and out and sunshine the air and sunsets and sunrises and so forth. She went home and she was telling her kids this. And one of her kids, the youngest one, went to school and they had the regular show and tell. And so the little guy, he got up and he told his fellow students and teacher about sun sights and sun nights. And the teacher made him stay in after school and made him write lines on the blackboard that 1,000 times, I will not lie to my teacher anymore.
What?
1,000 times.
What? Yeah.
And the mother went on a rampage, being critical of the system. And then she came back to me and she says, you wouldn't know how much trouble you've got me into in my life in terms of what I've been telling my kids and what they've been doing out in the public. So, but yeah, she made him stand after school and made him write on the blackboard. It probably wasn't 1,000 times, but he had to write over and over again, I will not lie to my teacher again.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of stories in Asia as well. I remember one of my friends from one of my students in school. His English was so strong that the teacher couldn't find a single error, you know. But the teacher still refused to give him 100 marks, 100%. And this little boy, he was only 11 years old in year 5. He came back to class because he was in my English tuition class at that time, and he said, Teacher Ann, you know, they looked over my paper 3 times and finally found that I didn't put a full stop in one of my answers, and they deducted 0.5 of a mark. And so he got 99.5, and the teacher was satisfied that it wasn't 100%. So this is the kind of things that you get from and the children can tell you, and they're pissed. They're pissed by the whole thing. And that's what goes on. I know in Hong Kong, for instance, the teachers put in what do you call parameters that technically is about looking for ways to not give you marks, right? So, you know, this even at year 5, primary 5, we're not talking about little children trying to teach them how to write. No. So the math that they do in Hong Kong is in square paper, talking about square boxes, right? And the equal sign, so this is the square, must start from this line and it must touch this line. Who writes equal signs like that, right? So the box, it must touch from this end to that end. If you don't, the answer is incorrect, right?
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, right? And then, number 4, you have to do this 4. You cannot do an open 4, just that teacher. So nobody ever gets an A in her class because she look for every one of these things. The minute it doesn't touch the line, just doesn't touch it, is incorrect. So this is I'm sharing from Malaysia, Hong Kong, all over. It just doesn't make sense. All right. Yeah. So we're talking about by mistake. Yeah. So many things were discovered by mistake. You're absolutely right. And that was me discovering that upgrading worked by mistake. As in we just gave it a shot and it just worked, you know. Yeah. So thank you very much. I'm done with that rant.
Oh, it was a wonderful rant, I'll tell you that.
But the thing is, you just imagine, to us it sounds so idiotic, right? But the kids are learning from teachers like that. Oh my God.
Oh.
People, adults who cannot think, and they expect these teachers to develop and nurture young kids to be able to think. I don't know. I just can't.
Not to go off on a tangent, but you're absolutely right, because a teacher, any kind of teacher, that's any kind of, you know, that's worth any their salt, meets a student where they are. You know, they don't necessarily, you know, have this kind of dogmatic, you have to do this or you're a failure. I mean, that is absolutely, and you just don't know the kid that you're talking to. That's my point. And, you know, you could have a really, really sharp kid and you don't know his home life or her home life, and you don't know the circumstances, and you may be really causing a lot of harm.
And Joe, I think, sorry, Steve, you want to say something?
Go ahead, please. Go ahead, continue.
Joe, just now, you know, you were joking and you said that that you wish your mistakes were like this Fleming's mistake, penicillin, right? Yeah, it'll be interesting for you to think about the mistakes that you made that came out to be something amazing in your life work. Yeah, maybe you should. I would love to hear some of that.
I could give you a story about that. That could be yeah. I could do. I mean, that's not. But I could write a mistake book, literally. So,
Well, I can tell you that I've written 65 songs. Probably 15 of them are written from mistakes. Because I was performing a song, I made a mistake, hit the wrong chord, said, "Dadgum, that's cool. Let me do that a couple more times," and out come a song.
Hmm.
I'd also like to say that if I'd have had my teacher, instead of just going through and correcting my errors, if I had been able to sit down and think through my errors, I probably would have recognized early on a part of my brain that just worked differently. And the reason why, like the I before E except after C or whatever rule, instead of just correcting it, I learned the rule. I before C except, I before E except after C, instead of just correcting it. So that's an interesting thing. And a lot of my friends criticize me because when I get done with a performance or get done with a particular task, I like to debrief and look at all the problems. Well, you didn't have any problems. Well, let's identify if there was a problem in there, what was it? And somehow that gives me more of a foundation. It's just better. It's better to look at the problems along with the successes, right? To see both sides. Anyway.
Yeah. And the last thing is actually when we what's that?
Joe, what you got?
So CJ wrote about this when he wrote about Mistake. This is a really important book. It's called Ignorance by Stuart Firestein, who is a professor at Columbia. And really, I won't go into the whole thing, but it's, he critiques even the scientific method and how we even teach that, and how we teach kids to actually explore, and how not necessarily we don't teach them to ask good questions. We teach them to come up with answers.
Come up with the right answer.
And that's where the correction aspect of it. Give me the answer, correct it. It's an almost like a assembly line kind of approach.
Joe, will you put a link to that book in the chat, please?
Yeah, sure.
And so the last thing is that we kind of did a lot of the stuff working backwards, right? Because it, like us, the minute we step out of school, the world doesn't function in that manner, and mistakes are called first draft, second draft, final draft, or we call them work in progress, correct? So I'm like, so what are you teaching the kids? So in our schools we tend to talk about, guys, you're all work in progress, okay? Just remember work in progress, and we talk to them about the handphones, and you don't wait until the thing is perfect before it goes to market. The minute it's viable, it goes out, and then you work on refining it and upgrading it and so on. So we brought that into the classroom, and I realized we did that more because we didn't come from the background of teacher training, being teacher trained from the very beginning. We were out there already. Our space was more the real world, and working out there, we came back in, and then we looked at it, it's not making sense. So that was what we discovered. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. I'm done.
Wonderful. Okay, let's see here. We're not letting you get very far, John.
It's all right. I've just got a message from my wife I have to answer.
Okay.
She's out shopping to find a cupboard, and she's just sent me the dimensions and it won't work. So I just better before she buys it.
Cool.
So,
we can continue.
You're not going to let her learn from the mistake?
No, I'll pay for the mistake.
Yeah, right.
Richard, you're a troublemaker.
Yeah.
There's no mystique about that mistake.
I'll tell you. We're taking it too far. Taking it too far.
Just let me double check this, otherwise I'll be in strife. Have a look here. Somewhere here. No, that definitely will not work. Definitely will not work. Okay. So, all right, back to tungsten and tantalum carbide. That means nothing to me. I know of tungsten, but what's tungsten and tantalum carbide?
I don't know what tantalum carbide is. Tungsten has something to do with steel, doesn't it?
That's right. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So obviously 2 elements have been blended successfully.
I'm going to look up tantalum carbide. Does somebody want to look up tungsten?
I'll look up tungsten.
All right.
Tungsten is what we use for the filament, right?
Yes, that sounds right.
Tantalum carbide is a chemical compound. They form a family of binary chemical compounds of this is Wikipedia giving me some kind of a formula. There's a little Bucky diagram, Bucky-esque diagram.
So that was tantalum. Tungsten is a chemical element. It's a rare metal found naturally on Earth, almost exclusively as compounds with other elements, was identified as a new element in 1781 and first isolated as a metal in 1783. Its important ores include satellite and wolframite, the latter lending the element its alternative name. So tungsten.
Okay, and this says now that what I looked up, they combine it with tungsten to make bits for drills, tool bits.
Very strong. Okay, yes.
That's why he put them together. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because years later when carbon-60 was discovered, it's harder than diamond.
Mm.
And of course, at one point, it was absolutely assumed that there was only 2 forms of carbon, and that was the pencil lead, soft carbon, or diamond, hard carbon. And carbon-60 ended up showing that there's 3 forms of carbon, and this one was even harder than diamond as far as drill bits and that sort of thing's concerned.
Tantalum carbide at the time, had the highest melting point. There's one other element that has, and it's a tantalum carbide. It's a different kind. It has a higher melting point of 4150 Kelvin or 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
Oh,
That's why he brought it up. Cool.
Okay, now we're going to have our minds expanded again. Coalescence from brittle copper cathode. So I have no idea what it means. A brittle copper cathode. A cathode is coalescence from brittle
Cathode ray tube.
Yeah,
Cathode ray tubes are some kind of electronic thing.
but coalescence. Okay. These things
I
are
just
obvious.
plugged that in to Google, coalescence process producing semi-fabricated cathode delamination. So it has something to do with cathode ray tubes in electronics. I can send you a PDF on it. It's okay. Okay. Ready for our next one?
Yep. Coaxial cables.
1929.
A type of electrical cable consisting of an inner conductor surrounded by a concentric conducting shield, with the two separated by a
coax is big for televisions and computers.
They've got protective sheaths.
Right.
So the coaxial refers to the inner conductor and the outer shield sharing a geometric axis.
Come on.
Yeah, I think they're pretty important.
Yeah.
So the first rocket engine was successful in 1929. I thought the Chinese were launching rockets long before that.
Well, Goddard, this is Goddard, the German guy who started bombing England. So I guess he gives him credit for that.
I think
Yeah,
the
Liz got it,
Chinese did the gunpowder propelled ones. I
Exactly.
think.
Yes, I know. I'm being flippant, Dan. I'm aware of this. The origin of the energy for the Chinese rockets was gunpowder.
Yeah.
Yes, this is the rocket engine.
Yes.
Yeah.
1929 was the first automatic pilot in an aeroplane.
Wow.
interesting.
Pretty early.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I did not have any idea that we had paper bottles in 1929 used for frozen juice and vegetables.
Yeah.
Paper bottles. No, never knew about that.
Oh boy, now we're getting to some synergetics here with the next item.
Explain this to me then, Steve.
Well, the closest packing effect, this is where Bucky goes into his spheres and how you stack spheres to create a tetrahedron and the space in between the spheres, where we could go to synergetics and see all those curved triangles and pyramids and triangular tetrahedra and pyramids and octahedra. So, and there was theory developed on how closely you can pack. How many oranges can you put in a box? Is a practical
Yes.
practical application of that.
1930, a cyclotron.
Atom
Have-
smash.
Yes, yes. And electrolytic sheet copper. So copper is a good conductor, but what's electrolytic sheet copper?
Electrolytic.
An electrolytic cell is an electrochemical
Occurs
cell.
consistently, yeah.
Electrolysis uses direct current flowing through an electrolyte to produce chemical changes of electrodes, cathodes. In other words, it increases conductivity, I think. It's a chemical manufacturing process for increasing conductivity and otherwise non-spontaneous. It broke it, and I'm into Wikipedia.
Yeah. Electrolytic refining of copper is used to purify the metal using electrolysis. In this method, the anode is made from impure copper, while the cathode is made from pure copper. The electrolyte is made from acidified copper sulfate solution.
Cool.
Okay. Electrolytic sheet copper. Electrolytic powdered metal.
Photography.
So what's spectrophotography?
The electromagnetic spectrum. The principal colors were recognized in the spectrum are red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, and violet. Each color is slightly different in energy level. So we figured out how to make our pretty diagrams that we use in our computers all the time. And you guys know they take pictures of galaxies, but they're non-visible, but they scale those into visible light frequencies and thus create pretty pictures, right? So this is spectrophotography.
Does the name Aston mean anything else to people?
Does what?
Aston Martin.
Yep.
Aston Martin, and then Aston cigars. Yeah.
It's interesting. It talks about Aston 1922 making a big chemical discovery around isotopes and got the Nobel Prize for it. So it'd be interesting to know whether what what his number was in terms of chemists getting the Nobel Prize, because Fuller talks about Van Hoff. I'm not sure what the year was, but he was the first chemist to get a Nobel Prize, and he was the one that relied on or focused on the importance of modeling in terms of learning and understanding. And then it went out of sort of popularity in terms of just the simple math equations. That's partly why Fuller brought back this whole idea of modeling with the tetrahedron, in order to revive this whole the importance of modeling, as Van Hoff found it in his work. And again, going back to carbon-60, it was modeling that allowed the people to make the discovery, and they discovered it by mistake. They thought the carbon structure that they were looking for was going to be made up of hexagons, and the more they tried to put hexagons together, the more it just laid out flat like chicken wire. And then one story goes is that one of the scientists went into his young boy's bedroom to say goodnight, and he saw all the paraphernalia, sports paraphernalia, and all of a sudden his eye went to the soccer ball, and he saw hexagons and pentagons. And all of a sudden he said, oh my gosh, if we combine hexagons and pentagons, it should curl. And that's exactly what it did when he modeled it with paper modeling in the middle of the night, to see it curl up into a perfect sphere. And that was the discovery of carbon, third form of carbon.
Well, now, Richard, you keep saying carbon-60, and I suspected that that had to be a buckyball. And so I checked my AI, and it is carbon-60 is the fullerene or the buckyball.
Or the full name is Buckminster fullerene.
That's right, Buckminster fullerene.
Yeah,
and the fact that he predicted that.
They named that because the protocol in naming new discoveries is that you can't use the discoverer's name. So they went through apparently all kinds of things, like they went through the notion of a football or various other sports-related names, until one of them said, well, look, we got the idea out of the Expo 67 dome, and so why don't we call it a fullerene? And then eventually it became Buckminster fullerene.
Cool.
You can read about it on Buckminster Fuller Big Ideas.
I think I met the author.
Yeah, I volunteered to write about it without knowing much about it in depth, other than I have all the key books that tell the story of the discovery. Yeah. Anyway, that's.
And here's something I didn't know. Buckyballs are usually non-toxic and are less than a nanometer in size, making them useful inside the body.
Yeah.
It's funny that, one of the things I remember my father is the first time I really heard of Buckminster Fuller was even before CJ and everybody was the fullerene when I was younger.
So how would that have happened, that your father was talking to you about a fullerene?
Chemistry. He actually knew chemistry pretty well.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So.
I have something to share about Sorry?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have something to share about 1930. I think my family, we have no information before 1931. Zilch, nada.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
So your
because,
origins are shrouded in mystery.
Yeah. So, because we never asked, right? The only reason 1931 has any relevance to me right now is that my dad was born 1931. So even in the family, I don't know what, because we're doing the chronophile, I'm just suddenly discovering all these things that I don't know what's before 1931. Because my grandmother, yes, I don't even know when my grandmother was born. And so I only had one grandparent surviving. The rest passed away when my parents were children then, So literally it's an empty blank slate for my family before that. And most times they were not educated as well. So we have no written record of anything. And that is on the my family side. So the other day, my cousin Anna, you've met her, we were just talking, and she has got more information about our family than I ever did from my dad, because her mom is my dad's sister. So women tend to share more. My dad shared nothing, of the past, and even about my grandmother and so on. So I really am blank. So now that this is a realization I just realized as we had the today's meeting, I'm gonna have to think about how to get information and see how far back I can go, right? Then the other thing is, I think in another meeting, I mentioned that Malaysia, we really don't have the history of Malaysia before 1490 something, if I'm not wrong. So all our history books began at 1490 something. So before that, we have nada, no information in any of our history learning whatsoever. So, and today I just, while we were sharing just now, I just went backwards and I found 2 bits of information, short little bits. One is the first people to live in Malaysia were Stone Age hunter-gatherers. They arrived as early as 8000 BC. Later, Stone Age farmers came to Malaya and displaced them. The hunter-gatherers continued to exist, but they retreated into remote areas. In a short little slide, yeah? And the only other thing I also found is, because the rest is all early kingdoms, which starts at 14 something, and then British Malaya, and they always start, and then they tell you when the Portuguese came to started settlements here, and the Dutch, and then the British. Before that, we have nothing. Then there's a little bit here, which is 3 bullet points. A brief history of Malaysia, a busy seaport for European and Far East traders for many hundreds of years. Starts with the history of Malacca, founded in, this is the first time I'm getting any information about the 13th century by Sumatran prince. Became an influential port city. Beyond that, again, nothing. So today, for the first time, thank you very much, I found 2 bits of information about Malaysia before 1490 something. Okay, so it really got me thinking. Our meetings every Sunday on this chronophile. Okay, we can go on to the first air-conditioned passenger train now.
Right, 1930. Where was that first air-conditioned passenger train?
The bottom of 1930.
Yes, was that in England or was that in the US? Or because the English have always been very big on their trains. There were huge advances in trains made during the Victorian era.
Is between Jersey City and Washington, D.C.
There you go.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, it's the first one in North America.
Well, that's the world, isn't it, Richard?
Because I'm sure Australians and Canadians both would like to be. 60 years ago, the Asia was the first completely air-conditioned train in the world.
Yes.
It was in the world's first air-conditioner train, Manchuria, 1934.
Ooh.
Wow.
So it's a little bit. Oh, wow.
And then where is the first passenger railway? Okay, first passenger railway, that was in England. Wow. So here's an article on the word air-conditioned train. Now, he's saying passenger car, right? So, oh, passenger train, he's saying the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have thought that one of the first air-conditioned trains would have been on the Gone, the Madelite to Darwin.
Mm-hmm.
I understand it might be a little warm and dusty on that
Can
trip.
be a little warm. Yes, it can be a little warm there. All right. So there are competing claims.
Yeah.
The first balloon flight to the stratosphere
Hmm.
was
Mm.
31.
The article I just read about air-conditioned trains said that its unique feature was that air conditioning system rarely found even in buildings at the time. So
Mhm.
the air conditioner train was a big deal.
Mhm. Was Picard French?
I hope
I
so.
believe so,
Could
yes,
be.
yeah. Can't imagine it being otherwise. Otherwise, my Star Trek days are scarred.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only Picard.
That's the first thing comes to mind. Jean-Luc.
Okay. Shall we
So-
continue?
Yes. Just looking at stratosphere balloon flights. No. Okay. Then we have neoprene rubber, developed in 1931.
Can somebody explain yeah, I'll look it up.
I think it's the rubber that we use for the scuba diving suits, I think.
Right. Yes, I think so.
Stratosphere.
Mhm. You want to go back and double check Picard in terms of French? Turns out he's Swiss. Swiss
Really?
Oh, okay.
What I found on the internet regarding that stratosphere balloon flight, no Picard is mentioned. It says May of 1931, a guy named Augusta and his Augusta Picard. Oh, there he is. Augusta
Yeah.
Picard, physicist.
And his
Swiss,
wife. And his
Augusta-
wife.
yeah. And his twin brother, Jean.
Oh.
Hmm.
Yeah?
So neoprene rubber is used for laptop sleeves, orthopedic braces, electrical insulation, medical gloves, liquid and sheet applied elastomeric membranes or flashings, and automotive fan belts. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it myself. Medical devices.
Yep.
So
it's,
neoprene rubber is synthetic rubber. It's probably the first synthetic rubber.
Yeah.
My guess. That's why he mentioned it.
Hmm.
It's stronger and harder than natural rubber and resistant to many chemicals, including water, oil, solvents, fire, ozone, and sunlight.
Hmm.
And retains flexibility over a wide range of temperatures. It's not considered toxic, but the gases produced during the manufacturing can be hazardous.
I'd imagine, yeah.
Hmm.
It's
So
not resistant to strong oxidizing acids.
And plasticizers are used to improve flexibility, so
Okay, and for a complete change of subject, the Empire State Building was completed and became the world's tallest building. Briefly, when was it replaced?
I don't know what year it was replaced.
1931.
Interestingly, what's that?
I say
It was,
completed in 31.
well, you know, it was interesting. Not to, you know, bring up, you know, kind of the tragic events, but I believe it's and I'll double check in a moment. You know, it was the Empire State Building did have a plane that actually flew into it early on, and so that when constructing these other buildings like the Twin Towers, that was accounted for to some degree. They didn't account for a 747 full of fuel to fly into it. So interestingly enough, yeah, I mean, it was building that tall of a building was started to, you know, kind of changed architecture. $150 feet.
And it took them 1 year and 45 days to build it.
Good. Yeah, you can't even get permits in that time frame now. Yeah.
Well, to answer one of your questions, I asked about the tallest building prior to the Empire State Building. The Empire State Building wasn't the first tallest building in the world, which doesn't make sense. That's what AI would say. But here are some other buildings that held the title before it. The Eiffel Tower, Ulm Minster, in 1890 became the tallest building at 530 feet.
Gee.
That's 1,250 feet. This particular source is not saying how high the Eiffel Tower is. Park Row Building was the world's tallest skyscraper until 1974. The Chrysler Building, 1928 1930, reached a height of 1,000 feet. So in 31, the Empire State Building beat the Chrysler Building.
What was it? What year
What's that?
What year did you say that?
The Chrysler Building was built between 1928 and 1930. It was 1,006 feet. At the time, it was the tallest building in the world for 11 months. For 11 months, it was the tallest building in the world.
But you know, the Empire State Building was supposedly the tallest building. Well, this doesn't make sense. I thought the Sears Tower was taller than earlier.
The Empire State Building was the tallest building for 41 years in 19.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading.
Yeah.
I'm thinking this has to be wrong.
Now go back to the Eiffel Tower. It was built to honor the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution, and it was built for the 1889 Paris Exposition.
How tall is it?
How tall is it?
Mm-hmm.
Oops, I have to find that out.
How tall is the Eiffel Tower? 1,083. Well, it's 984 feet tall, but it's 1,083 feet to its tip.
Uh-huh.
Wow. It was a bomber that actually crashed into the
Eiffel Tower?
into the Empire State Building.
Really?
B-25.
Prior to 9/11, we had a bomber
Oh,
land in the
Yeah,
crash.
I just said, yeah, no, that was the Twin Towers were actually constructed with the idea that a plane could possibly hit it. And I was just mentioning to everyone, they just didn't account for 747 for the fuel.
That crashed
Yeah.
into the Empire State Building. My gosh, there's pictures of the Empire State Building with steam coming out of it.
Yeah, it's a real scene. I watched a documentary on the construction of the Twin Towers. And then so they went back and they actually showed they actually had like these photos, and it was yeah, it was pretty significant event.
Mm. In the same year, there's an around the world flight.
Now, you guys, that's a picture of a B-25 bomber right there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And the reason why I have a shirt with a B-25 on it was because my dad was a gunner in a B-24, which is the same aircraft, basically, got shot down 3 times in the Pacific in World War II.
Hmm.
If you look at a B-24, B-25, you'll see there's a gunner pit on the tail, and on top of it, in the front nose, and on the sides, there are gunners. And he was a gunner in a B-24, got shot down 3 times.
That's pretty amazing, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
between
really
my
is.
grandmother and my dad, it's a miracle I'm even here.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
Gee, I'd never put the two together before.
Is that going to go into your book?
Yeah, it should. Should be the opening chapter.
Do you know how special this book is? Forget the content inside. Just realize the
Yeah,
author is here by a
exactly.
miracle, by
Yeah.
a compound miracle.
I'm humbled to open the book like
Yeah.
this.
Cool. I'm just delighted that you guys are willing to look into this, because usually we'd race over these things, right?
Mm.
yeah.
It's a bit of fun.
Oh my, it is fun.
Yes, when you look, there's a lot happening in 1931.
Mm.
Buildings, we've got buildings and bridges and flights.
Yeah, and
and-
this is during the Depression too. Wow, Girdles. I'm not going to jump ahead here, but wow, I didn't know it was 31.
Mm,
Oh, there is a lot. Heavy water. I remember that too.
mm.
I mean, it's not, I wasn't there, but it was the big difference between the Germans and us.
I'm trying to read about neutrino.
Rubber?
No, neutrino.
Oh, neutrino.
Yes.
Well, you got, how far down are you?
Just after the George Washington Bridge.
Oh, yes, neutrino. Yes, yes, yes.
Pauli postulates neutrinos 25 years before they were first observed. Yeah.
So what's a neutrino?
A neutrino are particles that are throughout the universe from the Big Bang. They penetrate everything all the time, millions of them. Millions of neutrinos are going through you and me right now.
What do they do?
that I don't think anybody knows. But let's see if somebody can find me wrong on there. They just happen to be present everywhere in the universe, and they are part of the Big Bang, part of the evidence of they're the background radiation from the Big Bang. Where did neutrinos come from? We're going to see how smart I think I am. Neutrinos are produced by the sun, supernovas, black holes, pulsars, gamma ray bursts, and active galactic nuclei. Neutrinos are created when atomic nuclei break apart or come together, or during high energy collisions of subatomic particles. For example, in the sun, neutrinos are released during nuclear fusion, which protons fuse to form helium. Process also releases energy that eventually reaches Earth at heat and light. Well, that process reaches Earth, but that's separate from neutrinos. Here we go. The majority of neutrinos in the universe may have originated during the Big Bang, which is why scientists study them to better understand how the universe formed. However, neutrinos can also come from other sources, such as supernovas and black holes.
Well, looks like they also have anti-neutrinos.
Neutrinos are the worst particles in the universe.
What's that?
Well, it was
So-
renamed by Enrico Fermi. Oh, I'm sorry.
I've been
Sorry.
seeing neutrinos a lot, but just no clue what it does, you know?
I got, there was part of me, Steve, that wanted you to come back and say, let me see, if I got this right. And I was hoping that they said something like it came from New Jersey. Or something.
Are you ready for this? Even a banana emits neutrinos. They come from the natural radioactivity of the potassium in the bananas. Once produced, these ghostly particles almost never interact with other matter. They just fly right through. So I was pretty correct when I said that neutrinos are part of the background radiation from the Big Bang. I think I was pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're right.
No, and it says that neutrinos confirm the presence of dark matter.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1931, Buckminster Fuller cites that the physicist Pauli postulated neutrinos.
Yeah, that's really what I'm most impressed with, is that how he came up with that, with 25 years before they were actually observed. And so, well, it was a hypothesis. It was said he suggested that an undetected particle was being emitted alongside the electron in the decay process to account for the missing energy. Probably should have read the sentence before that. Postulated the existence of neutrons to explain the apparent violation of conservation of energy and angular momentum in beta decay.
Yeah, radioactive decay.
Right. He suggested at the end of there, yeah.
So angular momentum is a really cool thing, you guys.
I got one of the best things from CJ for that.
You got what?
No, I'm sorry. I'm really being bad tonight.
I'd like to hear what you were going to say, boy. Okay, well, I'll say what I was going to say about angular momentum. Angular momentum is what makes a spiral galaxy not dissipate, because a spiral galaxy goes around and it should be expanding constantly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the spiral goes out, but angular momentum of the particles inside the galaxy keep moving in towards the center. So while the spiral arms go out, it's moving in towards itself. So it's moving out and in at the same time because of angular momentum. Bucky was big on angular momentum, I think.
Oh, he was huge. I mean, it was, yeah.
Certain kind of angular.
Yeah. So Pauli proposed neutrinos to try to explain radioactive decay. He said the reason why there's radioactive decay is because something is leaving. What is it? It's neutrinos. He made them up. The neutrino was, in Pauli's words, a desperate remedy. I have done a terrible thing, he said. I have postulated a neutrino.
Well, that means he and Joe should both go to the corner and
Yeah,
That's right.
and get
That's right.
corrected. And get
repent
corrected.
their errors. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But that's a good point. I mean, the idea that he made the prediction, there's a certain degree of, well, let's call it courage. That he put himself out there.
Pauli originally called it a neutron, but when Fermi discovered a
Yeah.
neutral charged particle, then they had to call the neutron the neutral charged particle, and therefore gave the word neutrino to this thing that Pauli had predicted.
Mm. I'm just reading about, is it Gödel's or Gödel's proof?
Oh yeah, that's one of the most significant discoveries. Well, maybe in mathematics history. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but
Gödel's proof is that you can't prove anything with mathematics.
Right.
that's right. There's no complete system.
Oh, really?
There's no complete system.
Yeah, no. I mean, this statement is true or false. Well, that is
His
true.
proof killed the search for a consistent, complete mathematical system.
No,
Right.
it was massive. I mean, there were people that believed that they could come up with a system that was complete and consistent.
Perfect explanation of the universe. And Gödel said, no way. And he proved it.
But the interesting thing about that is that it also speaks about the limits of language and knowing and self-knowing.
And I think that Stephen Wolfram, with his new irreducible computation, the computational irreducibility, Stephen Wolfram's gone the other direction. Gödel proved the fact that you couldn't solve the problem, and Stephen Wolfram shows why that's true. In fact, Stephen Wolfram argues that time is an artifact of the computational nature of the universe, which is not predictable. That time is simply what is required in order to do the next iteration of whatever is. I'm sorry to jump off into 2025. I just skipped 100 years.
No, I mean it's still being talked about. I mean, this is Douglas also. I mean, I'll put a link to the chat. Talks about obviously pretty extensively. But the magnitude of what he discovered, is that kind of in a sense kind of redirected the way people were starting to try to approach problems, as opposed to coming up with some universal system that that they no longer looked at it like that. They started to look at it from as putting parts together and making connections within the universe. not necessarily trying to come up with a system that explains everything.
Have
So
we kind of
it's a completely different approach to that. Yeah. Sounds like a Bucky approach, to be quite honest.
Hmm.
Has our conversation just disintegrated into whatever catches our eye next? Have we
We're all
finished
researching.
31?
We're all researching.
Yeah, I love it. And what's so interesting, well, I'm going to share this on my takeaway when we leave, but where are we now on this little chart?
1931.
Yeah.
We haven't finished 1931 yet?
Nope.
No.
I was
Okay.
just reading about heavy water.
Yeah, I'm researching heavy water too.
Is this AI, as in artificial intelligence, Williams, or Al Williams? It doesn't look like Al.
That's exactly right. I was having the same problem, John. And I also want to bring up that it's in 1931, before we leave 31, that Richard's chronology adds a couple things.
Yes.
So let's finish 31 here on for Bucky, and then let's do 31 and 32 from Richard.
Okay.
Have we finished?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we can go to.
All right, I have, if you guys may not have Richard's thing, but I have it, so I'm going to bring it up here. Here's Richard's. You can all see that now, right?
31, Jane
Yeah.
Addams,
Yeah.
the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, Jane Addams worked on Teddy Roosevelt's campaign. She was also a pacifist,
Mm-hmm.
and in 1920-21, the profession of social work was quite a young profession, and the American Red Cross decided to hire its professionals with that kind of credential. But then somebody complained that by doing that, that would align the Red Cross with a partisan position of Jane Addams and her pacifism. And so the Red Cross turned around, they fired every social worker. And then it's interesting, that's 10 years later, she wins the Nobel Peace Prize for her work.
Cool.
Hmm.
And she was a community activist.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Then you add in 1931, Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion House.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Why didn't Bucky put that on his own list?
I think it's in 1932, it appears, I think.
Oh, you do?
Hmm. Yeah,
Well,
he's 19.
and that,
Hmm.
Yeah, he puts it in 1932.
Mm-hmm.
Should we change that, Richard?
well, it's interesting. You should go back and check it. I took that reference out of either the new book that was written about inventing the future, or it was taken from another book that had the chronology in it. So I should go and double check to see who's right,
It's-
Fuller or.
No, it's
Well,
not
is
that. 31 is design, 32 is the prototype.
Oh,
You know,
okay. There he is.
just
Yeah,
for-
the design in 31.
Hmm.
Forgive me for asking this question. I may just not recall where are these aligned to when they had come into Bucky's consciousness, or when they happened?
Well, I mean, the people who wrote about Bucky in terms of putting in this kind of chronophile information were getting it from his chronophiles.
Right.
So
he may have just been aware of it that year written it down. It may not have occurred, you know, in real time like that. So if it's off a year,
Should I edit your
I mean, that
sheet
could,
Richard, then, or should we?
I think he
no,
wrote
I
it
think
here as
Richard
well.
would be right.
He wrote it in 1932, develops model of Dymaxion house.
Okay, good.
Dymaxion deployment
Which-
unit.
Richard should like that because it correlates with his family marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that's the thing that was been interesting in the search that I put in all the chronophile information that I could about Fuller, and I took it from largely two sources. I also took it from here, from the critical path. And then whenever he did something that has been noted, then I tried to find out whether or not there was something that was associated either with my family or my profession that happened in the same year or the same time.
So do you want to attribute that Dymaxion house to 31 or 32, Richard?
Well, I'm sticking with 31 until I go and check the source.
Good. I'll leave it there and make it bold.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting, again, Anne talking about limited knowledge about family and so forth. My parents didn't talk an awful lot about, their early years and so forth, but they were married in 1932, and it was a horrible rainstorm kind of wedding where my father almost didn't make it to the altar. And when they left for their honeymoon, they were in a brand new car, might have been a model, whatever, Ford, and they were slogging through mud with chains on the tires. And they got to a motel or hotel where they were supposed to be for the first night, but they got there so late that there was nobody there. So they had to go upstairs and try doors until they found one that was open. And in the morning, they came out, and the chains on their car, the back wheels, had worn a hole right through the fenders. So
Wow.
it's maybe a Titanic story. It's kind of remarkable that they actually stayed together any longer than one day.
And then you have that Fuller closes Shelter Magazine. Was this a publication from Fuller?
Yes, I think so. I've been seeing other information about the Shelter magazine. In fact, the Trim Tab members that are going to Stanford on Thursday, one of the boxes that they wanted was to see all of the copies that they had there of the Shelter magazine.
And he closed down the magazine because the New Deal was just going to create a bunch of the same old, same old. Is that what he did?
Well, that's a good question. Or he closed it down because now FDR was going to implement everything that he predicted. I would have to search that out some more to find out why he closed it at the same time as FDR. That's another interesting, family connection for me. My father was almost the youngest, the 11th of 12, and there was 8 boys in the family. And by the time they got to him, they'd run out of names. So all he got was plain Fred, no middle name, no nothing. And so years later, in order to create a middle name for himself, he borrowed from Roosevelt, and he referred to himself as FDR. he picked a pretty good name, I guess.
Okay, should we go back to the other?
To Fuller's.
Fuller's List, yeah.
Okay. I'm pushing buttons now to achieve that. Okay, 1932.
Boeing and Douglas, all metal passenger aeroplanes. Now, what's a cosmic ray camera?
Wow, I don't know.
Not intergalactic, is it? Let's have a look. A cosmic ray calendar. Camera, rather. Cosmic ray camera. Cosmic ray camera. Capturing cosmic rays with a digital camera. But this is much later. There's nothing about 1932. This is talking about capturing cosmic rays with a digital camera. Hmm.
There's not much that you can find about cosmic ray camera.
No.
You can find cosmic rays,
Yes,
but
that's
not.
Well, we'll just have to accept that it happened, but it wasn't very important. No.
I found a little article here that says Dmitry Skobelin's first photographed cosmic ray tracks in 1927 using a cloud chamber. And
When
then
was
cosmic rays are high energy subatomic particles that travel through space at nearly the speed of light. In 1912, Victor Hess and his associates discovered cosmic rays while flying in a balloon at an altitude of 16,000 feet. Hess's discovery led to the modern understanding of cosmic rays as particles of high energy from space. In 1936, Hess was awarded the Nobel Prize for his discovery. So I don't know what Bucky was thinking, because there's an article on the history of cosmic ray research. It's going to download out of my phone.
Okay, I found a couple of other things online. In 1929, the yo-yo was invented. Oh, it was reinvented as an American fad in 1929. And the car radio. And then in 1930, there's the Scotch tape. 1931 is stop action photography.
Yeah, I forgot to bring up your book, Anne. Are you, are you looking online, or are you using your book as a reference?
It is online. I didn't pull out the book either.
There's this great book that Anne talked about. I found it on eBay for cheap. Gosh, this book has to 1928. It's that much stuff. And after 1928, there's only that much stuff. So 2/3, well, roughly, maybe a little bit, maybe 60% of the book is prior to 1920.
I think the book ends at 2010, I think.
Yeah, what
Now, this
one of
is
the
interesting.
interesting questions is, where did Bucky get all this stuff from?
Yeah.
Well, also, I'm just looking here, I've done some research, and it says the Dymaxion house was completed in 1930. But according to Bucky, it was 1932.
You guys, in Anne's book, the electric guitar was invented in 1931. And guess who did it? Rickenbacker. I don't know if that means anything to you guys, but the Beatles played a Rickenbacker 12-string.
Oh.
George played a Rickenbacker 12-string, and Rickenbacker basses are really good basses. And who would have thought? And look at that weird contraption. When Les Paul tried to create an electric guitar, he used his first prototype was literally a train. What are those things called they use in train tracks? The logs that go across the train tracks?
Sleepers.
They're what?
Is it the sleepers, right? Is it the
Sleepers.
Sleepers.
No, the logs that when they nail the iron tracks down, they nail them onto logs. They're called
Sleepers.
Really?
Sleepers.
That's right. I agree with you, Anne.
Well, my goodness. You guys on that side of the world must think weird stuff. Pretty cool. You use them
I
in
teach-
drawings and everything.
I teach English. It came up in a I think it was a story, a horror story that I used. Mm.
Wow, this has been fun.
Mm.
Oh yeah, shoot, we're getting there, you guys. It's time to go. Okay, we'll continue with 1932. Did we finish 32? Dymaxion House, first set of sulfa drugs, South Atlantic Transoceanic Zeppelin service. So we'll start with 1933 next time, unless you guys want to bring back up 19.
Well, I want to know why my research says the Dymaxion House was completed in 1930.
Mm.
I'll tell you, Richard, you've got a big responsibility.
All right, I'll see
Redesigned
what I
in
can do.
1945.
Okay, so I got so excited. Last time I looked at the clock, it was 10:35. Now it's 10:56. We're pushing it. John, how are you feeling, and what are your takeaways
Good to
tonight?
be back. A nice, relaxed, casual stroll down memory lane through history, learning things I knew nothing about before. So, yeah, it's fun to be back. Good to see you all. I'm happy.
Dynamite. Want to pass it along?
Yes, I do. Joe, you look too serious.
Me? This
How
is the
are you
best I
feeling?
can. This is. I gotta tell you, I'm not kidding. That's the biggest smile I can have. That was it. I mean, that was the best I could do. Really, I'm being honest. But that's okay. It's genetic. But no, I'm feeling not feeling well physically, but feeling great. I had a great time. I think these free flowing conversations are important. Bucky actually talked a lot about play, and this is kind of a form of that. And I think that exploring timelines and instead of maybe looking at a specific text is a good way of actually making connections between ideas. And so I think that that's I mean, and to be quite honest, I have been looking up some of ever since we mentioned about Girls Proof and this just some ideas about objective truth. And anyway, I went down a rabbit hole for a moment, but it was a lot of fun. It was a connection across a couple of other areas. That a book called The Design Way, which we kind of covered extensively in some of the Bucky groups I know that are very familiar with that book. So anyway, so I have a few different takeaways. Definitely learned a lot, and it was great to be here. Great to be here. Anne, how do you feel? Which takeaway?
Oh, mine's really short because I've spoken just now enough. It's more about I realize how much I don't know about my country and also my family. So there. It's a very, very powerful realization though. So yes, Richard, how do you feel and what is your takeaway today?
Well, this is very interesting for me right now, since we ended on sort of 1932 when my parents got married. There was another young couple in this from the same town that he was a young medical doctor, or he was studying for medicine, and his family and her family were dead against them getting married until he finished medical school. So they eloped on the same day that my folks got married. Make a long story short, he ended up with the RAF. He got posted in India, and they had 2 or 3 young children. And then he was posted to Singapore and was captured by the
Oh.
Japanese, and he had disappeared until the end of the war. Nobody knew whether he was alive or dead. But it turns out he was a typical sort of medical doctor savior in a POW camp. He kept the spirits up and obviously practicing medicine. And his daughter became a filmmaker. And so she found his diary, much like a chronophile. And so she turned it into a film, first that she's ever done. And she had the reason the story I'm telling you now is because the narrator she obtained for her story was Donald Sutherland, who
Oh, wow.
who
Very
just
cool.
died this week.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I had no idea.
and
How old was he, Richard?
it says he was 88, so he was also very close to being born around the year that we stopped.
Yeah, he's 4 years old.
And anyway, so it's of all the sort of film accolades that he achieved over the years, this is the one that sort of resonates most for me, to know that he was the narrator for this doctor and his time in the prisoner of war camp and the lives that he was involved with in saving and so forth. It was sort of the River of Kwai kind of connection. Anyway, that's my takeaway, and it's been a wonderful sort of reconnection with the chronophiles of myself and Bucky, and I'll go do my research and see if I can double check some of those facts. And where are we? Over to you, Steve. Back to you, Steve. What are you taking away, and how do you
Did
feel?
we get everybody? Joe, you've already went?
Yeah.
I'm not paying very good attention, I guess. Listen, this has been amazing to me. I'll tell you my big takeaway. Although I think the Rickenbacker electric guitar in 1931, I don't know how the hell Bucky left that off his list. I can't understand. But I will say that it's interesting that we all have access to the internet. We all live in today's world, and yet each of us were pursuing a research, and we each got a little different picture of what it was. And you know how when I went to school, it was like there was one answer to everything.
Mm.
And what we're
Yeah.
finding out here is that what was Bucky thinking? And then as we look at it, we're seeing all different kinds of things. And that's very humbling to me, because I tell you, I really love being right. In my life. When I could be right, it was really cool. I've learned that it's impossible, though, so I don't like to be right anymore as much as I want to be heard. You know?
Wow.
And I hate being wrong. I don't have to be right, but I hate being wrong. And there are so many great answers we're coming up with here. This is so cool. I'm just grateful for each,
Wow.
like we say, being willing just to sit back and like be curious.
Yeah.
Be curious. So I'm real grateful. Thank you all very much. We complete then?
See you next
Yes.
week.
Yeah,
Right.
that was really something, Steve, that you just shared. Yeah, the idea that just wanting to be heard instead of wanting to be right.
Yeah.
That is exactly what I've been taught this past week with my mom and the interaction that she's had with the woman that's staying with us. And that's exactly it in one sentence. It's not about reason. It's not. That was good.
Okay, y'all.
Right.
Okay. Take care.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Later.